Now that we've got the clock all stripped down, I'm going to just have a bit of a wipe around it to get some of the worst of the oil and gunk off while handling it. I'm going to be a little bit conservative with the cleaning of it. I don't see any need to be too invasive, but what I will do is get a little bit of isopropanol on this cloth and just degrease it a little bit so that I've got a cleanish surface to work with. Now when I've just been cleaning this wheel, the tooth that I noticed earlier fell out, so it wasn't strong enough, and it's difficult, it probably won't come across on camera, but there is a crack right at the root of where they've, just there, right at the root of where they've opened up this excessive hole for securing their tooth. Now I've got the tooth. Could do a bit of dentistry. I could refit that and it would probably be okay, but would it be strong enough? Would it be reliable enough? If it falls out in service, then we're in real trouble. What I'm thinking about doing, and I won't decide this right now, I'll sleep on it and have a think, is I'm thinking about widening this and putting a decent sized dovetail in. I wouldn't have gone anything like as deep personally. I would have only gone about halfway through the rim. If I take a nice dovetail section out there, make a nice piece to go in to make the tooth out of, but because they've already cracked this here, I can't rivet it as I would do normally, because if I rivet it, it's just going to try and spread the wheel and open this crack open. And it's going to keep coming loose and fall out. So I think I'm going to be forced to sweat a small amount of soft solder in around the joints, which would then make it good and strong, because we'd have all the surface area all the way around that dovetail on both sides. So I think that's what I'm going to have to do. But as I say, I'll sleep on it and have a ponder before I decide. Just looking at the mainspring barrel, looks in fair condition, but this is common wear that you see an awful lot. The main bearings for the clock, essentially, these are the bearings that the barrel rotates around, and although there are no teeth on the barrel, it's important that these bushes are in relatively good condition, a lot better than this anyway, because if you lose any power here with dragging, if the barrel can tilt over side to side and drag on the ends of the arbor, on the inside of the cap and the inside of the barrel, and you lose power there, then you're robbing the clock of power before you start. So it doesn't matter how good the escapement is and everything, you've not got as much power coming to it anyway. And looking at this is a sort of a slurry there's a brass content to this slurry. This is almost like gold paint. Right, focus on that there. So it's almost like a kind of a gold paint. That's brass content. So that's actually material from the barrel cap from the bush that's mixing with the oil as it wears. So yeah, definitely need to rebush both ends of the barrel on this one. It is a nicely made clock, this. Got the shape of that ratchet pull for the winding click. Now you can see here, this is the tail that I pushed down when I was using my piece of silver steel earlier. So the hole is between those teeth there. So it just pushes through. And allows you to release the click so that you can let the power down as I showed. Very nice. It's in reasonably good condition as well. So before going too much further, I always like to count up the train. So just to keep a record of the teeth that are on the wheels, and that's so that I can do the calculations for duration and, more importantly, the pendulum length and beats per hour, so I can work out what the clock's supposed to be doing, as opposed to what perhaps it does with the pendulum as it is. So it puts me into the right ballpark when coming to put it on test after working on the clock. Now that I've slept on it as well, I've decided what I'm going to do about the missing tooth here. I am going to cut a little dovetail out and to soft solder a piece in to repair that tooth. There we go. So I've just opened up the dovetail, and will now cut a piece of cast brass which I have hammer hardened, and I will cut out a piece that will fit in there, that I can just sweat some soft solder around and then cut the tooth form out. So there we go with the slot cut out for the dovetailed piece. Here is a little piece of cast brass that I've prepared, and that fits very nicely into the slot. Now, under normal circumstances, I would then pin that over to rivet it in, and that would be perfectly sufficient, and I could get that to be almost invisible as a dry joint with no solder. However, as I say, because there's that little crack I think the process of riveting it is going to spread the crack open slightly. So I'm actually going to just soft solder it, and I'm only talking about sweating a tiniest little bit in, and then I can reduce the thickness down, and it should still be an almost invisible repair if done carefully. There we go, I've just sweat as little solder as I could try and get away with into the joint. And I suspect actually, just looking down in the, if I can get the camera to focus. Just looking down in the joint, in the crossing here is where the crack is. And I suspect that a little bit of solder has actually sweat through the crack as well, which is good. So now I can just clean it up and try not to touch the wheel too much, get it as invisible as possible, and then I can shape the tooth. Okay, so this is how far I've got now. The piece is soft soldered in. You can just make out the dovetail now that I've tidied it up. Same on the other side. So it's a pretty invisible joint anyway, but with the little bit of soft solder just sweated in, it means that the joint is strong now. The wheel's not going to be at risk of spreading and the piece falling out. So next I just need to mark up the tooth and cut and file it out. Now I'm just going to check that the depthing is okay with the contract wheel, that tooth doesn't stick or anything, and that it runs through smoothly. So I'm just putting the contract wheel in with the centre wheel between the plates. And I can then just test to see that it runs through okay. And yeah, it's running through nice and smooth. Can't actually feel it at all. You can see here on the barrel arbor that the brass is from the bushing is just starting to pick up here on the surface of the pivot. You see just here there is brass picking up, and that is embedding itself in the surface of the pivot, which is becoming quite scored from wear. So that's an indication that this needs to be cleaned up and burnished. And then we already know from looking at the just the general wear that the bushes need to be redone on both ends of the barrel. And here are the pivots after I've cleaned them up and burnished them. So you can see that galling of the brass has now been removed, and the rough surface has been filed away with a pivot file and then burnished to give it a good working surface. So now that that's done on both ends, pivots are in good condition. You can go ahead and rebush the barrel accordingly. So here's the rebushed mainspring barrel. I haven't been able to hide the bush particularly brilliantly because there was already a really deep oil sink in it. So because I haven't made the bush bigger than the oil sink, and because I didn't want to put that extreme of an oil sink back in again, it means that my bush is slightly visible, but I'm not worried about that. I always try to bush within whatever's there so that I'm not doing anything too invasive. The bush at the cap end, you can't get it absolutely tight in every way. It's nice in some directions and then sloppy in others, and that's because the pivot is actually barreled slightly. It's a sort of an oval shape, so that means that you have to just work with the largest diameter, and that's not going to affect it too much. I could have turned the pivot down a little bit and made it parallel again, but there's not a huge amount of material on that pivot, giving it a shoulder for the plate already, so I didn't want to make that any less, and it wasn't really necessary to for the proper functioning. I've got the barrel running very nicely, and that's the point, is that the bearings are in good condition so that it's nice and free. And also I've pushed it so that it's controlled the end shake a little bit, because before it was really really sloppy. So there's still plenty of end shake there, but still plenty of end shake, but it's no longer excessive. So there we go. There's the barrel overhauled, if you like.